After chances started to skyrocket last night, Tropical Storm Dolly has formed in the main development region, and the track it is currently going has it heading towards the Lesser Antilles and potentially bring some big impacts for there. However, we're going to want to watch this because there might be a situation where if it can battle some really bad conditions and get to the other side in the Atlantic Basin, you could see a scenario where this tropical system could regenerate and potentially strengthen into something we would not expect. In today's video, we're going to be going over everything you need to know about Tropical Storm Dolly. Here is what we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. Tropical Storm Dolly is currently moving across the main development region, expected to be impacting parts of the Lesser Antilles in the next few days. We're going to be going over the NHC's latest update. We're going to be going over model data and the conditions it has ahead of it. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we are just going to go ahead and dive right into it. Starting off, here is the NHC's public advisory on Tropical Storm Dolly. Tropical Storm Dolly forms over the central tropical Atlantic. Interests in the Leeward Islands should monitor. It is a 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm. It was a 90-90 Invest 96L at 8 o'clock this morning. Now it is a 40-mile-an-hour tropical storm with a minimum central pressure of 1,007 millibars. Moving west at a very fast speed at 24 miles per hour. That's almost the residential speed in my neighborhood right there with the speed limit. So this system is really hauling for a tropical cyclone. Average speed for a tropical cyclone, just for context, is around 15 miles per hour. This is going at 24, so it's really starting to just haul across much of the MDR. But with that being said, this is the situation that we also are dealing with. Tropical storm force winds extending outward 60 miles from the center. And if we go ahead and read a little bit of the discussion that we have, this is why they designated it. Satellite images indicate that an area of low pressure, Invest 96L, has a developed, well-defined center this morning, along with organized deep convection. There is a bit of northwesterly shear, causing most of the thunderstorm activity to be located on the southern side of the circulation, largely away from the center. Scatometer data indicates that maximum winds are near 35 knots or 40 miles per hour in the northeastern quadrant, along with a Dvorak 2.5 classification from TAF B, so advisories are initiated on Tropical Storm Dolly. So that's what we're looking at. Matter of fact, I know LTW actually sent me something into my server earlier. This is what he was showing me. This was the ASCAP pass and the ASCAP data that we had presented for this. Look at this. This is a textbook definition of a well-defined circulation of a closed low. Right here, there's no room for argument, there's no room for debate with this. This is your classic textbook low pressure system. That's why they designate this a tropical storm instead of Invest 96L. And given the unfortunate events we have seen this week with the tragic passing of Dolly Parton, there have been a lot of memes and a lot of talking about it in the weather community with what's going on over here. So first of all, rest in peace to Dolly Parton. Second of all, let's go ahead and dive right back into the data. The environment around Dolly should be unfavorable for strengthening by tomorrow, with increasing southwesterly shear due to a central Atlantic upper-level trough, fast forward motion, and dry air aloft. Until then, some slight intensification is possible consistent with model consensus. All of our guidance is showing Dolly opening up into a strong tropical wave before it reaches the Antilles, which is our expectation, and given with post-tropical positions, and they're largely given the risk of gusty rains and rainfall. The timing of the use of the name of Dolly is purely coincidental. The NHC has to actually say this. This is absolutely unbelievable right here. The timing of the use of Dolly for this storm is purely coincidental. I have never seen an NHC advisory put this out, and the reason they have to put this out is due to the tragic passing of Dolly Parton from earlier this week. You would not see this if this was just a regular update right here, but because there's been so much attention and so many memes and so many people talking about it in the weather community, this is why the NHC has to put this out. It's both hilarious and kind of interesting at the same time. But here's what we have, and this is what they also say about it. Tropical storm and hurricane names for the North Atlantic Basin originate from 6 predetermined rotating lists established by the WMO Region 4 Hurricane Committee. The name Dolly replaced Diana after the 1990 hurricane season and was first used in 1996. I find that kind of hilarious, just even having to read that as someone who's been covering tropics for the last 5 years on YouTube. You see something new every day, ladies and gentlemen, and this is just a prime example of that. What we have seen that isn't new, though, is their intensity guidance, which is forecasting a 45-mile-per-hour peak before remaining at 40 miles per hour as a post-tropical cyclone. And here is the cone that we have for you, ladies and gentlemen, moving at a very fast pace across much of the MDR, expected to be impacting the Lesser Antilles starting Saturday night going into Sunday, remaining post-tropical as it starts moving through. And if that track continues, you do see a situation where this could potentially impact Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and areas further to the west. So it's a situation that we're going to want to pay attention to. This track here kind of reminds me of Tropical Storm Erica back in 2015 by a slight amount. Erica was a bit further to the south, so I do want to kind of emphasize that. Also reminds me of Tropical Storm Grace back in 2015 as well. Just a couple of side notes and a few tidbits to kind of talk about as well. But we also need to take a quick gander at some model data. We're going to start off by taking a quick look at some ensembles. We're not going to spend too much time with this. We're just going to get to the operational forecast, and then we're going to get to the conditions and kind of do a deeper analysis on those. But here, just for brief comparison right here, this is the situation we have with the ensemble data. And the reason I am showing you this is because we don't have any hurricane run data at this current point issued and given to us by Tropical Tidbits. That'll probably come at the 18Z, and by the time that it does come out, this video will probably be out so you guys can take a look at it. But ultimately, this is what we have going on right here. At least according to the Euro, it's a little bit ahead of schedule in terms of the power numbers and in terms of what's going on. We're at 1,007 millibars at this current point. I also do want to emphasize this was initialized at 0Z, so it was initialized at 8 p.m. Eastern time last night. They designated this a tropical storm just this morning, so it kind of is lagging a little bit behind, and it will be curious to see what the 12Z and 18Z data show going forward. Let's go ahead and go to 120 hours out. A lot of the ensembles start moving towards the Antilles. You have a pretty decent spread of them right here, just moving through parts of Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, the Antilles, and potentially heading towards parts of the Atlantic Basin, which if it does get that far and the conditions kind of warrant and allow the system to hold together, you might see a situation where some things might get really interesting down the line. I talked about this a little bit before. You could see some potential intensification. We've talked about this in a lot of videos. The Atlantic Basin is the best place for really good strengthening and for power numbers to really tap in due to less dry air, due to a lot warmer water temperatures, and due to less wind shear. All three of those things ring true even at this current point. Let's go ahead and go to 240 hours out. I know we've jumped a few days at this current point, but we're just kind of mainly skimming through the ensembles, and we're mainly going to focus on the operational and the conditions. But taking a quick gander at things do look a little interesting. Yes, they're a little spread out. Some of them have it moving out to sea and then strengthening in the Atlantic or subtropical Atlantic Basin over here, but you are seeing a pretty large minority of the ensemble runs having the system moving further to the west and potentially entering the Gulf region over here. And if that does go into there, you might see a situation where you see some intensification due to the warmer waters over there and a few other conditions that we're going to be talking about going forward. We're going to be covering all our bases here. We're going to talk about conditions and kind of see what the conditions will be looking at with each possible scenario, but I'm just kind of laying the baseline out here, and I'm just showing you the ensembles that we have pulled up for you right now. Here is your GFS ensembles right here. We're going to go ahead and go to 10 days out. Definitely a bit more of spread out, to say the very least. You have a situation where the system starts to move through the Antilles, maybe dissipates a little bit, and then regenerates and reforms down the line, either in the Gulf or recurves into the Atlantic Basin. Either way, both situations are interesting. We're going to want to watch and see how this will ultimately pan out, but the GFS is still showing a pretty decent size of their model runs, kind of forecasting that at this current point. And so is the FNV3. The FNV3 is actually somewhat aggressive in terms of the intensification early on. You're looking at a lot of power ensembles right here. Let's go ahead and go back to about 96 hours out just to show you what we were looking at. We'll actually even go further back to 72 hours. You're looking at moderate to strong tropical storm strength over here, in that portion of the Atlantic, kind of on par with what we are seeing with current tropical storm Dolly. So it's a situation we're going to want to watch out for. The FNV3 kind of keeps the power numbers up there, but it's not necessarily the best in terms of its organization from what I'm seeing and how it kind of fizzles out a little bit as it moves towards Puerto Rico. But then as time goes on, kind of that energy and kind of that wave that we see that Dolly kind of starts to disintegrate and then move towards the west reemerges either in the Gulf or in the Atlantic Basin. So you're kind of seeing those two areas starting to pop up a little bit more, and something we're going to want to pay attention to. Lastly, here is the GENC, a bit more on the conservative side, which is pretty typical, but it is showcasing those two scenarios once again after it moves through parts of Puerto Rico and after it moves away from the Antilles. So it's a situation we're going to want to monitor, and definitely something we're going to continue to keep an eye on here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But here is the operational runs. We're going to mainly use the European for this, mainly just so that way we can get what's going on and kind of see how the ensembles and operational are acting, as well as use this for conditions and other factors as well. Here is the European operational, already a tropical storm moving through parts of the main development region and then starting to disintegrate and starting to weaken as it starts moving into more worse conditions. And then as time continues to go on, it brings some pretty significant impacts to parts of the Antilles. Puerto Rico is definitely in the line of fire, so is Hispaniola, according to a lot of these models. And then from that point on, the operational, while it's definitely buying that this is a tropical storm, isn't necessarily buying too much of the what's going on further down the line scenario. So we're going to want to watch and see how that progresses. It's going to be a situation here where it's going to be more so where by the time we get to about tomorrow night, we're going to be relying less on models and more so on the conditions and what's going on over there, especially with the ensembles being as aggressive as they are, at least in terms of the power numbers I have seen. You're going to want to watch and see how the conditions are going to warrant and how this storm is going to react to those conditions. What are the conditions, Patrick? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and show you our wind shear, and we'll go ahead and show you the dry air aspect of things just to give you an idea of what we may be talking about and what we might be facing down the line. Here is your wind shear map for you, ladies and gentlemen. As time continues to go on, you are battling some northerly shear over here a bit further to the north of the system. You do have some of that storm reinforced winds, the kind of the winds that are being produced by the storm itself that kind of looks like shear on the map that's a bit further around. But more so, I'm paying attention to what's north of that in this pocket over here of this yellowish orangish color over here along that jet streak right there. That's going to be kind of stubborn and stay in that region, but as time continues to go on, you do start to see that shear starting to increase as it gets reinforced from the Caribbean in this section right here. This is an absolute graveyard once again for the Caribbean, mainly due to El Nino. But as time continues to go on, look at the Atlantic Basin. We're going to want to watch out for this. If it moves into the southern part of the basin, it's absolutely going to be in good shear conditions, and that continues to persist for quite some time. So let's say we go ahead and go to 96 hours out. Let's say by the time the system moves away from Puerto Rico, moves away from the Antilles, if it reorganizes and stays kind of organized and then emerges into this part of the Atlantic Basin, it's going to have really good wind shear for it to get its act together and potentially organize and re-strengthen some. That is something we're going to want to pay attention to, and this is why the ensembles are definitely looking at this and going, okay, we're still battling some conditions right now, but this is still very much possible if it can hold itself together. That's a very big if. Can it hold itself together? In order for that to happen, it's just going to have to battle through that wind shear. It's just going to have to run through that wind shear. And given where it's at right now, in order for it to have a better shot, it's going to have to start organizing and strengthening right now over the next 24 hours. So that way it'll have a better chance and it can last a little bit longer the more it strengthens and the more it organizes. It has from now until about tomorrow night for it to do that before it starts running into worse and worse conditions. But overall, we're going to want to watch and see, especially in the next 36 hours, how things will pan out. because as time continues to go on, this wind shear pocket in this part of the Atlantic is not going anywhere anytime soon. Yeah, it starts to retreat a little bit, but you are seeing less shear generally in this area compared to what we're seeing in the MDR and in the Caribbean. And looking at the Gulf, if we want to go even that far to the west, you're looking at lower shear as well. You're looking at a lot of these jets staying further up to the north by the time we get to early September, and that's kicking a lot of the shear out of the Gulf for right now. There is some pockets of it, don't get me wrong, but at least according to the model guidance I've seen, where it kind of stays a bit further to on the eastern side of the Gulf region near the loop current, in those regions, that wind shear is not going to really do too much, and you have a situation where you're going to have a low shear environment if it survives and stays in the Atlantic Basin, or if it survives and moves even further to the west into the Gulf. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation, a win-win situation if it holds itself together in terms of the system development. But that's what we're just looking at with the wind shear aspect of it. Even going 10 days out, both areas look a lot better for tropical development in terms of your shear compared to what we were seeing 5 or even 6 days out. The longer it lasts and the longer it takes to build itself up, and the quicker it can do that in the hour it has right now, you have a situation where the system could really start ramping up down the line. But moisture is only one piece of the puzzle. What is the dry air aspect of it like? And this is going to be your biggest limiting factor, and this is going to be the reason why this will either make or this will break. What you have is some dry air up to the north that's kind of inhibiting it a little bit right now, but you have a pretty big moisture pocket on the southern half and further to the south outside of the system. That's expected to persist as time continues to progress. As we get into tomorrow and as time continues to move on, it starts to really get surrounded with a bunch of dry air. This system's going to need to just produce a lot of convection. And I'd say starting tonight, when the sun starts going down and diurnal maximum starts picking up on this more, you're going to need to start producing a lot of convection if you want to see some good organization and some good strengthening with this. It's going to have to do it now, and it's going to have to do it in the next few hours before that dry air starts choking it out. The good news is, in terms of development, you do see some reorganization. You do see that moisture pocket persisting as that open wave starts to head towards parts of the Antilles and Puerto Rico. And then as you get towards the Atlantic Basin, the dry air goes from Sahara air levels to more mixable. So if it can keep producing its own convection, you're going to have a scenario where it's going to have a lot easier of a time battling the dry air over here in this part compared to what we've seen in parts of the main development region. That's your situation you're going to want to pay attention to. Even going 6, 7, 8 days out right here, you do see some dry air in parts of the MDR and parts of the Atlantic Basin, but it's not as egregious and it's not as overwhelming as it is in the MDR, and it's definitely a lot more mixable with the exception of a few isolated areas. In the Gulf, there is some more of a dry air battle right there, especially going on right here. This system, again, is going to have to produce its own convection. It's going to have to fight for itself and really start ramping up in terms of its moisture component in order for it to keep going and in order for it to tap into those power numbers a bit further to the west. Can it do it? It's becoming increasingly likely from what I've seen, but it is still a very possible scenario at this current point, mainly due to one big factor. And here is that big factor. This is your water temperatures right here. This is what we were paying attention to. I was just refreshing it a couple of times to get our latest here. Here's where we're at right now. It's an area of about 28 to 27 or 27 to 28 degrees Celsius rather of water temperatures. That is 81 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who do not use the metric system, rather about 81 to 83. Regardless, still plenty warm for water development, plenty of warm for tropical development rather, in terms of where it's going right now. If it moves further up to the north, either way, if it moves into the Atlantic Basin or in the Gulf, your water temperatures absolutely skyrocket further to the north of Puerto Rico and further areas to the west. 30 degrees Celsius galore across these regions. That is 86 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who do not use the metric system. That is very warm. That is incredibly concerning to me. And this could be a situation where if it keeps producing its own convection and it takes advantage of the water temperatures it has ahead of it, you're going to see a scenario where the dry air that's there if the system produces enough convection to do so, can easily be fought off and can easily be choked out of the developing cyclone. It's going to be a very tough battle, but it has the ingredients to fight back and give it a run for its money. It's a situation we're going to want to monitor. It's a situation that we're going to want to see evolve as time continues to progress, primarily because we're also looking at some pretty significant ocean heat content too. Here is your OHC map. OHC, where it's at right now, is about 25 to 50 OHC, so it's not necessarily the best, but it does have something to work with. But if it moves further up to the west, you're seeing a Goldilocks scenario where you'll have an increase of OHC, but not necessarily the increase just yet of wind shear and dry air to inhibit it. You have your Goldilocks scenario over here in this part of the central MDR. It's starting to enter it right now. It's going to be entering it in the next day or so. If it's going to want to get its act together, this is your Goldilocks scenario. This is where your fuel tank starts to increase, because further to the west you have a lot more, but you also are battling more dry air and more wind shear, at least initially. After it gets past Puerto Rico, it starts to get its act together. You might see a different scenario, but ultimately it has its Goldilocks moment right now, and if it wants to do anything, it's going to need to get its act together in the next 36 hours. Mainly produce a ton of convection, organize very quickly. It has the ingredients to do it. It's just going to need to battle the dry air and battle the upcoming wind shear until it gets towards the Lesser Antilles. So those are all the things that we're paying attention to at this current point in time, and these are all the things we'll continue to keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we are going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. Feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that will be in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.